Um, Usually when we talk about a classic locked room mystery, there's a very specific picture that comes to mind, right?
Oh, definitely.
Like you are probably picturing an Agatha Christie novel, an old English manor, a heavy oak door locked from the inside, and, a completely impossible crime scene right in the middle of the room.
Right, because the mystery is contained. It has physical boundaries.
Exactly. You know precisely where the crime happened, and nobody could have gotten in or out. The walls themselves, they basically define the parameters of what is possible.
It limits the variables for the investigator, yeah.
Right, but consider what happens when you take that exact same impossible scenario, like a scene that utterly defies all logic, human behavior, and physical evidence, and you just remove the walls.
Which changes everything.
It totally does. You place it not in a cozy English manner, but out in the vast, open, freezing wilderness of the 1959 Soviet Union. No walls, no locked doors, just endless miles of ice, snow, and silence.
It is incredibly eerie to think about.
It really is. So for you listening today, we are cutting through 60 years of internet ghost stories, alien conspiracies, and Yeti sightings to look at the actual documented facts.
Yeah, the real facts of the Dyatlov Pass incident.
Exactly. Our mission today is to unpack the source material, specifically an excerpt titled 18 The Unsolved Mystery of Dyatlov Pass, What Happened to the 9 Hikers, to see if recent scientific breakthroughs from 2021 can finally close the book on one of history's most terrifying cold cases.
And, I mean, it is a cold case in the most literal sense of the word. We are going back to January 23rd, 1959.
Right.
10 highly experienced young adventurers head deep into the Ural Mountains on a winter trek, and when the expedition is over, only one of those 10 returns alive.
Which is just devastating.
It is. But the fascination here isn't just about the macabre details, though. I mean, there are plenty of those. The real value is examining how the scientific method has been continuously applied and challenged to solve a puzzle that the original investigators famously and vaguely blamed on an unknown compelling force.
Yeah, that phrase. We will definitely get to that phrase. But to understand the tragedy, when you look at the expedition records, the expertise of this group really stands out, and that is vital to understanding the mystery.
Absolutely. The baseline for this entire tragedy rests on their competence.
Right, because if this had been a group of unprepared amateurs taking a winter stroll and getting lost, nobody would be talking about this 60 years later.
No, not at all. I mean, they understood the brutal margins of error in a Soviet winter, margins that are virtually zero.
We are talking about a group led by a 23-year-old engineering student named Igor Dyatlov. And the rest of the crew were largely his peers, right? From the Ural Polytechnic Institute.
Right, highly educated students and professionals.
Yeah, you look at the names Zinaida Kolmogorova, Yuri Doroshenko, Rustam Slobodin, Ludmila Dubinina, Alexander Kolovatov, Semyon Zolotaryov, Nikolai Thibault-Brignol, Yuri Krivonashenko, and Yuri Yudin. The records show these were tough, experienced outdoorsmen.
They really were. They knew the cold, they knew the gear, they knew the physics of survival, like how to build a snow shelter and manage their body heat.
Exactly. And their goal was Otorten Mountain. That route was classified as Category 3rd, which, that was the most difficult rating available at the time, wasn't it?
It was. So they were not taking any unnecessary risks. But early on in this expedition, there is a massive twist of fate.
Oh, this part always gets me.
Right. Yuri Yudin, one of the 10 hikers, he develops severe joint pain and illness. So he makes the difficult call to turn back and return to the nearest settlement.
The ultimate sliding doors moment for him. I mean, an agonizing decision at the time, I'm sure, but a mundane illness ended up saving his life.
It did. So the remaining 9 push forward. And according to the photographs and diaries they later recovered from their cameras, on February 1st, 1959, they pitched their final camp.
Okay.
They set up their heavy canvas tent on the eastern slope of a mountain called Kolotsiakol. And the translation of that name from the local indigenous Mansi language adds just a really grim layer of irony to the whole event.
Because it translates to Dead Mountain, right?
Yeah, Kolotsiakol translates to Dead Mountain, or Mountain of the Dead.
So they pitch their tent on Dead Mountain, they settle in for the night, and then something so terrifying happens that these 9 highly trained, rational engineering students completely lose their minds.
They absolutely panic.
Right. The physical evidence from the site shows that their tent was cut open from the inside, which is wild. It's like being in a car and choosing to smash through the roof to escape instead of just opening the door.
Right. They completely bypassed the normal entrance. They took knives to the heavy canvas and literally slashed their way out into the dark.
Think about the psychology of that moment, though. These are experienced outdoors people, who know, like they fundamentally know, that their tent is their absolute only barrier against freezing to death.
And the temperatures were plunging below minus 20 degrees Fahrenheit.
Exactly. So to deliberately destroy your only shelter in the middle of the night, it requires a frantic primal level of desperation. You aren't thinking about the freezing cold anymore.
No, you're just thinking about immediate survival.
Right. Survival from whatever is inside or immediately outside that tent. What could possibly cause that?
Well, when search teams finally located the abandoned snow-covered campsite weeks later on February 26th, the scene they documented only deepened the impossibility of it all.
I can't even imagine what those search teams thought.
Finding the slashed tent was just the beginning.
Because imagine you were reviewing these reports as a modern investigator, right? You track footprints leading away from the tent, and you find the first bodies just under a mile away.
Yeah, down near the edge of a forest under a large cedar tree.
Nearly a mile in the freezing snow, in the dark, and the hikers are completely inadequately dressed.
It's baffling.
Some are in only their socks or bare feet, some are just in their underwear.
And as the snow slowly melted over the next few months, the search parties found the rest of the victims scattered in the snow and in a nearby ravine. And the autopsies. This is where the narrative of a simple, tragic, freezing death completely falls apart.
Right, because you would expect hypothermia,
Yeah.
which is what the coroner initially found on some of the bodies.
Yeah.
You freeze to death after fleeing the tent. Tragic, sure, but scientifically straightforward.
Right, hypothermia makes sense.
But turn the page on those coroner reports, and you start seeing trauma that defies a simple freezing death. We were talking about severely fractured ribs, massive skull trauma.
Skin that had been charred, too, indicating they had either fallen into a fire or been exposed to extreme heat.
Yeah, and the reports detail massive internal blunt force trauma, but the paradox is that there were no external signs of a struggle.
None. There were no bruises, no lacerations on the skin surface, no soft tissue damage that would indicate hand-to-hand combat or being beaten by another human being.
Which is so bizarre.
It was internal crushing damage, very similar to what you might see if someone was struck by a vehicle at high speeds.
And then there are the grotesque details. Details that, frankly, sound like they belong in a horror movie, not a police report. Some of the victims in the ravine were found missing their eyes, missing their tongues.
Yeah.
Investigators also found scraps of the hikers' clothing and actual chunks of flesh high up in the branches of the cedar tree.
It really paints a picture of utter chaos. Like, were they climbing the branches of the cedar tree to escape something on the ground?
Or maybe they were trying to get a vantage point to look back up the slope at their tent.
It's entirely possible. But the final nail in the coffin for a neat, natural explanation involves the clothing. Investigators found that some of the tattered, burned articles of clothing the hikers were wearing tested positive for radioactive contamination.
Radioactivity. In the middle of the Ural Mountains in 1959,
Exactly.
the official Soviet investigation wrapped up in May of 1959, and their conclusion is legendary at this point. The final stamp on the file was that the hikers succumbed to an unknown compelling force.
And then they just sealed the records.
Right. And I mean, it is completely understandable why millions of people see that phrase as an admission of a cover-up. An unknown compelling force sounds like a cover-up, or at best, an admission of total defeat by the investigators. How do fractured ribs, missing eyeballs, and radiation fit into a standard freezing death?
They don't.
No. So the authorities locked the door on the investigation, and the human imagination naturally kicked that door down with theories about secret weapons testing, UFOs, and Yetildis.
Well, we do have to view that 1959 conclusion through the historical lens of the era. The Soviet Union in 1959 was characterized by intense secrecy and an impenetrable bureaucracy.
Right, the Cold War context.
Exactly. The military was conducting widespread tests, the Cold War was at its peak, and local officials were deeply afraid of making a mistake. Sealing records and using vague terminology like compelling force wasn't necessarily proof of an assassination or a UFO.
It was just bureaucratic speak.
Yeah, it was standard procedure when things got messy and investigators lacked the scientific tools to explain an anomaly. But that lack of detail birthed a 60-year industry of speculation.
Oh, for sure. For decades, the Dyatlov Pass incident was essentially frozen in time. But modern scientists recently attempted a rescue of the facts. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, records were unsealed, but it wasn't until 2019 that Russian authorities officially reopened the case to apply contemporary scientific methods.
And in 2020, they announced a new official conclusion. They stated that the most likely explanation was an avalanche.
Right.
Specifically, what they termed an avalanche-like snow slab event.
Okay, but before we talk about the evidence for that, you have to explain the mechanism of a snow slab. Because when I picture an avalanche, I picture a massive, roaring cloud of powdery snow rushing down a mountain. Something that would have swept the tent entirely away.
Yeah, that's what most people picture. Think of a snow slab less like a fluffy cloud of snow tumbling down a hill, and more like a dense, incredibly heavy mattress sliding off a tilted bed frame.
Okay, a heavy mattress.
Right. A snow slab is a compacted, solid block of ice and snow. The theory posits that when the hikers dug into the slope of the mountain to create a flat surface to pitch their tent, they unknowingly destabilized the foundation of the snowpack above them.
Oh, wow. So they undermined their own campsite.
Exactly. Hours later, the temperature dropped significantly, causing the brittle snow above to crack. A massive, solid slab silently slid down the mountain and crushed the tent.
A silent, heavy impact in the dead of night. So the slab hits the tent, they wake up terrified, trapped under immense weight. I mean, that perfectly explains the mechanism of cutting the tent open from the inside.
It really does.
They're suffocating, they slash their way out, and suddenly they're exposed to the extreme freezing temperatures, which ultimately kills them.
And the scientific community took this theory much further. In 2021, a team of researchers published a highly detailed study using advanced computer modeling and complex snow mechanics to prove this exact scenario could cause the specific injuries documented.
They basically built a virtual crash test dummy.
Yeah.
But for snow physics, right?
That is a great way to put it. They collaborated with engineers who study car crashes, created a digital replica of the mountain slope, modeled the exact canvas tent, and mapped the human ribcage against the density of a sliding snow block.
That is incredible.
The biomechanics of the simulation provided striking results. The computer models demonstrated that a heavy snow slab could absolutely produce the precise, blunt force trauma documented in the autopsies.
Really? Just from snow?
Well, imagine the hikers sleeping flat on their backs on their skis. They actually used their skis as the floor of the tent to keep off the snow.
Oh, right.
So the solid ground acts as an anvil, the heavy snow slab slides down and acts as the hammer.
Oh, that makes sense.
The crushing weight forces their rib cages and skulls against the hard floor. The impact is distributed broadly enough by the sleeping bags and canvas that it doesn't leave localized external bruising or lacerations.
But the immense pressure completely fractures the internal bones.
Exactly.
Okay, the virtual crash test dummy absolutely makes sense for the crushed ribs and skull trauma. The mechanics check out, and it elegantly explains the initial panic and the tent being cut from the inside. But I'm going to push back here.
Here.
We are looking at a computer model that explains the initial event. But does a heavy block of snow explain why their clothes were radioactive? Does a snow slab explain why there were missing eyes and tongues, or chunks of flesh left in the high branches of a cedar tree? An avalanche, no matter how dense, does not make you radioactive. And it definitely doesn't meticulously remove your tongue.
You're right, it doesn't. And this is exactly why the case refuses to completely die in the minds of the public. The 2021 computer model is brilliant at explaining the inciting incident, but investigators still have to explain the gruesome aftermath using separate, compounding natural mechanisms.
Okay, so separate mechanisms.
Right. Take the missing eyes and tongue, for example. The researchers who back the natural cause theory point heavily to the mechanisms of postmortem scavenging.
Ah, so animals found the bodies after they froze to death.
Specifically, small scavengers like foxes or birds. In extreme cold environments, when scavengers locate a frozen body, they cannot bite through thick winter clothing or frozen muscle mass. They instinctively go for the softest, most exposed tissues first.
Which would be the eyes, the tongue, and the lips.
Exactly. Those are the most vulnerable points. And the fact that the victims missing these features were found face down in a stream bed where water was actively flowing and accelerating decomposition, that only supports the biological scavenging theory.
Okay, that is grim but logical. What about the chunks of flesh in the trees, though?
The surviving evidence indicates that after fleeing the tent, the hikers attempted to build a fire under the cedar tree to survive. They were desperately breaking off high branches to fuel the fire.
Right.
In a state of profound hypothermia, blood flow is restricted from the extremities, causing severe frostbite and a condition called paradoxical undressing.
Where the brain becomes confused and the victim feels burning hot, right? So they start tearing off their clothes.
Exactly. And as they frantically climbed the tree to break branches, their hands and skin were so frozen and numb, they essentially tore their own skin on the rough bark without even feeling the pain.
Oh, man. Okay, so you have a snow slab crushing them, then hypothermia driving them to tear off their clothes and skin on a tree, followed by foxes scavenging their eyes. It requires a lot of dominoes to fall perfectly. But the biggest domino is still standing: the radiation.
Right?
How does natural biology or a snow slab explain the radioactive contamination found on their clothes?
The radiation is definitely the most stubborn outlier in the case, but again, historians and scientists point to mundane mechanisms of the 1950s rather than secret weapons.
Like what?
One strong theory involves the camping equipment itself. In the 1950s, the mantles used inside portable camping lanterns frequently contained thorium.
Oh, a radioactive element.
Exactly. They used it to make the lanterns burn brighter. If a lantern mantle broke in the chaos of the crushed tent or while they were trying to navigate the dark, the radioactive dust would have coated their clothing.
That makes a lot of sense.
Additionally, as engineering students at the Ural Polytechnic Institute during the Cold War, several of the hikers worked with or around radioactive materials in their daily academic lives. The trace amounts found on their sweaters could easily have been brought with them from the city.
So we have thorium lantern mantles, combined with post-mortem scavenging, combined with paradoxical undressing, all triggered by an isolated snow slab. The science explains the individual pieces, but I mean, it requires the listener to accept an incredibly messy, compounding series of coincidences.
And that reality is precisely why it is so hard for people to accept.
Yeah.
We are biologically wired to crave neat scientific endings. When an event is this tragic, we want the X-ray to show a clean break. We want a single, easily defined cause. But nature rarely provides a perfectly clean crime scene.
It's chaotic.
Right. Sometimes, a tragedy is just a compounding series of random, chaotic events that leaves behind a scene that looks completely like a supernatural horror story. Unanswered questions persist because human behavior in the face of absolute freezing terror isn't something you can perfectly program into a computer simulation.
It really is the uncomfortable boundary between our desire for logic and the reality of the chaotic unknown.
The Dyatlov Pass incident reminds us that no matter how much technology we develop, the natural world is still capable of producing mysteries that humble our greatest scientific minds. I mean, the sheer indifference of a mountain dropping a block of ice at the exact wrong moment is terrifying in its randomness.
It really is. To wrap this up, I want to leave you listening right now with one final thought to mull over as you think about the compounding chaos of that night. Let's go all the way back to the beginning of the journey. Think about Yuri Yudin,
The soul survived.
the single hiker who survived because he got sick on the trail. He lived his entire life. He passed away in 2013, actually knowing that a random, mundane illness was the absolute only thing standing between him and whatever happened on Dead Mountain. He lived with the immense weight of being the one who escaped the unknown compelling force.
Survivor's guilt on an unimaginable scale. Knowing that your friends endured unimaginable terror while you were safe in a hospital bed.
It really forces you to wonder, when we obsess over these complex theories about secret military hit squads, or weapons testing, or monsters in the woods, are we really just trying to find a villain to blame?
Because the alternative is worse.
Exactly. The alternative is that nature can wipe out 9 young, vibrant, highly experienced people in an instant of random freezing violence. Maybe that idea that we are so fragile and the physical world is so incredibly indifferent to our survival is just too terrifying to accept. So we invent villains to make sense of the chaos. We build metaphorical walls to turn the wilderness back into a locked room.
It is much easier for the human psyche to fear a monster with a motive than to accept the sheer, blank indifference of a collapsing snowpack.
Keep questioning the unknown and keep looking for the mechanisms behind the mysteries. Because whether it was a compounding series of natural disasters or something we still don't quite understand, the wilderness always holds on to its secrets. Thanks for joining us in the deep dive.